A room without books is like a body without a soul.
Hello and welcome to Tsundoku, the podcast for anyone who plans the kind of holiday where they can lie around and do a lot of reading. That's definitely on the cards for me this summer. I'm Sarah Martin.
And I'm Annie Hastwell. And in this episode we turn to crime and spy thrillers, and a book that's going to be going on a lot of summer holidays this year. Sarah?
Yes, it's Dust by Michael Brissenden. Now, Michael Brissenden might be a name that's familiar to you. You might have read his books, but he's also someone you might have seen on TV in front of Parliament House a million times as a reporter and investigative reporter on Four Corners.
And he's reinvented himself as an author, which is such an interesting
has.
career turn, and one that a few people have taken.
And he's turned to crime, and, you know, you'll hear more about why he's taken that path, but it makes sense, really. I mean, he would have seen and understood the many weird and wonderful stories that come out of all different places in Australia, and this one's set, you know, out in the rural landscape. It's in a, you know, drying up lake in the middle of nowhere where the population has been relying on income streams that just don't exist anymore. And so some turn to alternatives to get their money, and also it cracks a little bit into that world of conspiracy theories, you know, those things that circle in communities when there's a vacuum of opportunity.
Sovereign citizens? Are we talking sovereign citizens?
A little bit
here?
of sovereign citizens, but also some really reasonable conversations around, you know, the impact of things like new energy coming into rural landscapes and stuff. So stuff that is a real concern for people living on the land. It kind of weaves that in and sort of talks about the impact that's having as well.
I do love books by journalists because they have got a lot of knowledge about all the darker forces that operate behind the scenes, and the things often that you can't report on, you can put into a story.
Absolutely, and he sort of you'll hear, but he mentions about how, you know, you think of something fantastical, you do a bit of research and find out it's pretty close to the truth.
Anyway, we'll also look today at spy thrillers. Mick Herron, the best-selling author, and his spy thrillers set in London feature an eclectic cast of losers, we can say, washed up MI5 agents, but who actually end up usually solving whatever the problem is. They're fantastic books. I haven't read enough of them. I've got them on my long list to get to. There is also a sensationally popular TV series, which I think has announced the 6th series. His latest book, Clown Town, will also be in holiday suitcases, I would say, this year. Our reviewer, Annie Warburton, is going to take us behind the hype to find out just who Mick Herron really is and what he was doing all these years before fame hit.
Michael Brissenden has reinvented himself in recent years as a fantastic author. He's had many bestsellers in the crime genre, and Dust is not going to struggle to follow suit, to be honest. It's set in the shadow of a nearly dry lake in a town called Lake Hedden, where the community there has relied on that lake for its tourism trade, but as it's dried up, so has business. It kind of looks at the trucking industry, it looks at organised crime, and it weaves them all into something that's really pacey and interesting. Of course, it starts with the body. You know, when the lake dries up, the bodies come out into the sun, and it's absolutely gripping from the get-go. When I caught up with Michael, I asked him how much the landscape drives the story.
Well, I just love the idea of landscape as character, to be honest. I mean, I think it can be a great driver of story. I love the image that it creates as well, and it places people immediately in a place, if you like. So with this one in particular, I just love the idea of the lake receding and revealing secrets in the lake that people had wanted hidden and wanted to stay hidden. And also the consequences of, what happens to a small place when, one of their few means of livelihood is draining away. And the synergy of that I found really intriguing.
When did you start writing the book?
Probably the middle of last year.
Yeah, so it's in the spectre of the drought, and the dryness that we're experiencing.
Yeah, well, actually, I got the idea because, after Smoke had done really well, the publishers wanted another book pretty quickly, and I was casting around trying to find another idea, and I was reading actually about Lake Mead in Nevada, which is near Las Vegas, which was drying up. And as it was drying up, they were finding all sorts of things in the lake, including bodies, which the mob had been dumping there over the decades from Las Vegas. And I remembered that a colleague of mine, the late Paul Lockyer, who probably 20 years ago now, when Lake Cargelligo in Western New South Wales dried up, he did a similar sort of story. He went out there and they were playing cricket on the lake bed for the first time, and they were finding all sorts of things out there. And I just thought, well, look, this is a story that is pretty relevant back here in Australia as well, and I didn't really want to write another book set in the US, so I just invented a place out there somewhere, an hour and a half west of West Wyalong, towards South Australia somewhere, and just loved that idea of the lake draining away and revealing secrets.
And the characters that you've found in these places are really interesting because they really uphold the way that a community is really connected in the outback to, a couple of really core aspects of industry. So this one, you focused a lot on the importance of the trucking industry and the transportation lines throughout the outback of South Australia.
There were two industries, essentially. One was a pretty small tourism industry around the lake, which, of course, has disappeared. And the other one was a trucking industry. They were sort of a transport trucking hub, which also pretty much disappeared during COVID. And they were really the only two industries there. And now the only other industry that's coming is the sort of renewable energy transition, which is actually causing a whole lot of division and concern and anxiety in the community. But the trucking aspect for me was the way to actually talk about how some of the characters end up down in some pretty dangerous places, and how the trucking industry itself was actually based on a real story of a trucking company that they had two sets of accounts and they were borrowing money against their original to prop up the sort of one side of the business, which was off the books. And again, that was another idea that I just really was fascinated by, that such an important industry like the trucking industry could be used for such malfeasance if the opportunity arose.
When you find those, is that you're looking through the paper and you just see an article and you're like, hang on, wait, what?
Well, no, actually I did start to write that idea, and then I thought, well, I wonder if anything like this has actually ever happened. And I emailed a friend of mine, Adele Ferguson, who's actually done a lot of economic reporting, worked previously for the Financial Review for many, many years. And she said to me, actually, look, this has sort of happened, and so she sent me all this stuff related to this one particular company. And of course, it's not that company, and, it's completely different. But it was amazing that actually some of this stuff had actually happened. The company was using bikies as well to distribute some of the ill-gotten gains, and there were all sorts of things happening.
It's amazing how many times that something feels like it's sort of outside the realms of real life, but it's solidly in there, right?
Exactly. You're riding away and then suddenly you go, oh my God, it actually did happen. I mean, the other thing about this is that I was really interested in how people living on the edge can end up down some pretty dark places, and where social media and even some of the mainstream media is sending people in many ways. And clearly we've seen this happen quite a lot with the sovereign citizen movement, and what happened through COVID and what happened afterwards. And to really talk about the fiction echoes life or life echoes fiction, when this book actually came out, the day that it came out was the day that guy Dizzy Freeman actually shot those two cops in Western Victoria. So the synergy of that was all pretty alarming.
I was reading it at that time, and it was such a weird headspace to be in because I'm watching this play out in real life.
It was so confronting in many ways, and you really feel for the cops and everybody involved in that community in that situation. But, that sort of thing is happening. It really is happening.
And I like that Indust, you're showing that subtlety initially on how these things can happen, that different circumstances happen, that people sort of band together under an ideology.
How quickly it can happen too, and how people can start out on a sort of innocent inquisitorial journey and end up somewhere completely, off the charts and alarming and dangerous.
Now, I love stories that involve a police officer or a few police officers and touching on their personal life and how it impacts on their working world. That must be such a fun place to sit because it's so fertile in that you can draw in those personal aspects that really drive how the character behaves.
I love the idea of writing about cops because I've known quite a lot of them over the course of my career, got to know quite a lot of them, and they're very complicated people because They see every day over a career of 20, 25, 30 years, whatever, the sorts of things that if we saw once or twice would send us to a PTSD clinic, and they build up this scar tissue. They build up a level of cynicism. Not all of them, of course, but, some of them do. And also sometimes carry quite a lot of baggage and damage as a result of what they've had to do, what they've seen, and the difficulties of that job. I really love that idea of how complex that can make people. And so in this book, the main character is called Kravitz, and he is that guy. He's been around for a long time. He grew up in a working-class Western Sydney family. He didn't really have any other options but to go into the police. He was told by his careers counsellor that you are a frontline person. That's the sort of job that you should do. So he went and did it. And 25 years later, he's carrying a lot of those scars and things from that background, and he's teamed up with a younger cop who is completely different, who is a young woman who grew up in inner city gentrified terrace in Melbourne and went to Melbourne University and learnt the cello, and she comes to it from a very idealistic view of the world. And the two of them clash, quite obviously, because they have a very different view of the world and see things very differently. But over the course of the book, I think Kravitz, the older man, sees some of the idealism that she carries and sees great benefit in that, sees some of the things that he may have lost, and she looks at him and sees perhaps some of the things that might be coming for her. So they do come to an understanding over the course of the book. But I just really like that dynamic, And then there's another cop as well, which is the country cop, who's the only cop in town. And as he keeps saying, country policing is different.
Yeah, and you explore the interaction between a policeman in a tiny community. The behaviours and the interactions are significantly different.
Yeah, and he has different concerns, and obviously he has a different view of his own community as well, and is much more engaged with it and has much more at stake in many ways.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier, and it's sort of entwined in the story too, is that interaction between outback communities and the move to renewables and the impact that that's having on different communities and perspectives. That is a harsh reality for people living outback.
It really is. But it's coming. It's another thing. It's just like people sort of want to hold it back, but it's actually coming. And the thing is that it is actually tearing communities apart in so many ways. But it's also provided fertile ground for a lot of misinformation and disinformation as well. And it's sort of supercharged a lot of emotion in a lot of places like that. So you'll find that the dialogue that perhaps once would have been the political dialogue has become much more hostile and aggressive in a lot of ways. It's impossible, I think, to write about regional Australia at the moment, even though I'm writing fiction, but it is cemented in our current reality, right? And it's impossible to write about regional Australia without writing about what that is doing to communities.
Do you go spend time in regional areas in preparation for books, or are you sort of just grabbing on, a lifetime of experience and moving through those spaces?
Well, a bit of both, really, to be honest. I mean, I have spent a lot of time in those places over the years. I have quite a lot of family, actually, in that far western New South Wales area. So I do know the area quite well. But I do also go and sit out there and just sort of soak it up for a while too. That's always worth doing.
There's nothing better than a front bar in the middle of nowhere to really get a sense of something.
That's right.
Are you already working on the next one? What's your writing process?
I am working on the next ones. The two cops from this book are going into a new book. But, I generally start with this sort of idea or image, which I did with this in this case, and I have in the next book as well. I don't really actually know where it's going, but I know some of the characters. I know some of the challenges that those characters are going to have to face, and I know some of the things that I want to hit during the course of the writing. But honestly, I've got no idea how I'm going to get from point A to point B or C or D. But the important for me is just to sort of start writing and then, work it out as I go along. It's a fairly organic process. Do
you have a discipline around it in terms of so many hours a day?
Yeah, I do. I start in the morning and I work until I've done about 1,000 words. Do that in a day, I'm feeling pretty good.
Great. And do you always write in the same place?
Well, no, it depends. I spend a lot of time sitting in my little study in Canberra on my own, looking at the Labrador. I also, if I have to travel, I can write anywhere, to be honest.
Yeah. It is often about the graft, isn't it? The discipline to just get it down.
It really is just about putting it one word after another. And I find particularly that I can think about it and talk about it all the time, but nothing makes the story progress and the muse arrive better than sitting down and putting one word after another.
The editorial process for you, is it hefty? Do you go to the same editors? Do you have the same sort of team behind you?
No, I have had different ones because I switched publishers for the last book, and then that publishing house got bought out by Simon & Schuster, so, I've had different ones again this time. But they've all been good, and I actually do enjoy the editing process. I think editing is something that, provided it's a constructive process, everybody is actually trying to make the product a better product. And no one should close them off to professionals who read your work and basically have some pretty good suggestions mostly about, where you should take it and how you should progress it.
That's better for us, the reader, ultimately, I think,
Absolutely. Of course it is, and I'm not precious about it. I think it's a great thing to have someone edit your work.
Well, Michael, I'll let you go because I know you are having a massive day. Thank you for making some time for me.
No worries. Good on you. Thank you so much.
Author Michael Brissenden there, speaking to me about his latest novel, Dust, which is published by Simon & Schuster.
And you won't miss it, I'd say, when you walk into the bookshop.
No, I think it'll be everywhere, and it's the perfect holiday read.
This is Sundaku, the podcast for people who read on into the night because they just have to know how the book ends. And now to British spy thriller writer Mick Herron. We're going to hear from reviewer Annie Warburton, former long-time voice of the Tasmanian ABC airwaves, and a woman whose house is crammed floor to ceiling with books. Annie loves reading and watching movies with a passion. She's avidly read and watched Slow Horses, but in this review she investigates just who is Mick Herron, the writer.
I watched the first 4 series of the screen versions of Mick Herron's Slow Horses books, but I'm not sure I'll bother with the 5th and latest one that's currently streaming on Apple TV. The reason being, the TV show doesn't capture the brilliance of Herron's writing, his way with words, his mastery of metaphor and characterisation. Yes, Gary Oldman does a wonderful job of embodying Jackson Lamb, the rude, cynical, gross to the point of disgusting boss of the Slow Horses, the team of MI5 outcasts who work out of Slough House, whence their in-house nickname. And yes, the production is slick and stylish, right down to the edgy theme song, Strange Game, written and sung by Mick Jagger himself, a major fan of Herron's writing. There's more action in the TV series than in the books, but car chases and punch-ups and shoot-ups are a poor substitute for Herron's wonderfully evocative, witty, satirical, narrative voice. Unlike his predecessors in espionage fiction, Somerset Maugham, Graham Greene, Ian Fleming, John le Carré, Mick Herron was never a spy. He never worked in the secret world. After studying English at Oxford, he worked as a copy editor in an employment recruitment agency, a very dull job. But he was a creative writer at heart, and on long train commutes to London, he used to write poetry. That didn't pay, so he tried his hand at detective fiction. And in 2003, when he was 40, his first novel, Cemetery Road, was published. The first in a series of 4 about a London woman, Zoe Bone, who becomes a detective to escape an unhappy marriage. They did all right, but not well enough for Herron to quit his day job. The years of dreary commuting rolled on, and he continued to muse on themes of failure and unfulfilled potential. These musings inspired the idea of a group of people stuck in a career dead end with no hope of escape or advancement. The first of the Slow Horses books was published in 2010, when Herron was nearly 50. They weren't an immediate success, but when the right publisher got hold of them, Mick Herron quit that boring day job and became rich and famous. Secret Service agents were the ideal choice for his characters. It's their own fault they're in Slough House. They've blotted their copybooks in various ways. One left a top secret file on the tube, one has a drinking problem, one has a bad gambling habit. And in the case of River Cartwright, the grandson of a former MI5 chief and service legend, he messed up a training operation that caused havoc at King's Cross Station. The thing is, they can't be fired, basically because they know too much, and you don't want them taking you to the Anti-Discrimination Tribunal and spilling beans everywhere. So they're exiled to Slough House to do meaningless paperwork and, ideally, eventually resign of their own accord. But they don't. They hang on, hoping for rehabilitation. A futile hope, according to their boss, the unspeakable Jackson Lamb, who constantly reminds them what losers they are, flavouring his mockery with flatulence and cigarette smoke. And yet, Lamb is fiercely protective of his Joes, as he calls them, and needless to say, he and they always manage to save the day in the various scenarios that Herron rips from the headlines: Islamist terrorism, right-wing extremism, vengeful Russians still plotting skullduggery against the West. The highly literate New Yorker asked recently, is Mick Herron the best spy novelist of his generation? The answer is a definite yes. I'd go further and say he's one of the best authors currently writing in English in any genre. He's often compared to John le Carré, but it's le Carré with a lighter touch. Herron isn't frivolous, but he sees the blackly funny side of espionage and of UK power politics, where bad actors abound. Here there are rich pickings for Herron's satire. Ex-public schoolboys are a favourite target. A thinly disguised Boris Johnson cops some delicious bollocking in several of the stories. The TV series does capture some of this, and it can and does capture the sharp banter, says one character of Jackson Lamb. This monster hasn't got the manners of a warthog, but he does have the looks and charm, as you will have noticed. Says another, I'm an open book, the reply, but some of your pages have fallen out. Remember I said as a young man Herron was a poet? And it shows. There's a nice passage in The Secret Hours, which I've just finished. It's a kind of origin story about how Lamb and some of the other main characters came to be in Slough House. Much of it is set in Berlin after the wall came down. Herron has one character describe it thus. For years, Berlin was a city unlike any other. It was like some giant car crash, where everyone stops to look at the damage and a bottle gets passed round, and before you know it, there's a party underway right here at the accident site, where the flames haven't even died down yet. Says his listener, who may well be a younger Jackson Lamb, you sound dangerously like a poet. The reply, dangerous is what poets ought to be. If not dangerous, there's certainly something downright subversive in Herron's depiction of the British power establishment as a murky hotbed of treachery, ruthless ambition and moral laxity. Herron is very good at using his poetic skills to evoke a sense of place, especially so with Slough House itself. Early on in each book there's a set piece in which he takes us there. It varies with every telling, but we're always left in no doubt that it's not somewhere we'd want to work. He's conjured Slough House from memories of walking down Aldersgate Street in Finsbury every day from the tube to that dull job. This version, edited for brevity, is from Clowntown, the latest in the series. Slough House sits in one of those marginal spaces cities collect, then dump on disregarded streets or in corners never seen in daylight. London teems with them. In each of its boroughs you'll pass such buildings, squat, windowless, drab. And walking by them is like remembering a rainy Sunday from the 70s, triggering something that's almost boredom, almost pain, but never quite either. The premises gracing the pavement include a Chinese restaurant with ever-lowered shutters and a faded menu taped to its window. A down-at-heel newsagent's where pallets of off-brand cola cans block the aisle. And between the two, a weathered black door with a dusty milk bottle welded to its step, and an air of neglect suggesting it never opens, never closes. Anyone foolish enough to seek entry must do so via a back alley, where a yard in which wheelie bins lurk like corpulent hoodlums also reveals, like an admission of guilt, a door which sticks in all weathers and once forced open reveals nothing more high-tech than a staircase lined with peeling wallpaper. A single dim light bulb casts half-hearted shadows, and should you ascend the stairs, you would find a pair of offices neither inviting. The carpeting is scuffed, the skirting boards warp away from the walls. If there were a lift, it would have long stopped working. If there were hope, it would have left. The light in the building leaks away through cracks and fissures, and the air is heavy with regret.
There you are, Mick Herron, the poet. Who knew? Annie Warburton, broadcaster and critic, with that behind-the-scenes look at the man who created the series Slow Horses.
So it's that time of year, Annie, as we're starting to wrap up towards Christmas and New Year. I know podcasts don't have real time, but this is the reality of us in the world that outside of
there is real
the
time.
airwaves. And it's time for us to maybe have a look back. What were your reading highlights this year?
This is terrible because what I do is then I give them away. And so I go to look beside my bed and they've gone and I can't remember what they were. And I know I love them. But I did really love Ian McEwan, All That We Know, which complicated book but great. We had a very spirited discussion about that last night at our end of year book club. I also love an author called Dave Eggers, who I think of as like the Kurt Vonnegut of these times. He's an American author, ironic, satiric, so clever. And he wrote a book, I think a couple of years ago now, it's called The Every, and it envisages a world where Amazon and Google have united and basically running the world. It's fascinating, extremely funny, and very chilling.
I've reflected a little bit. My reading has run to crime novels a lot this year, but the ones that just felt like putting on a warm blanket is Richard Osman's series, The Thursday Murder Club. They're just so light and lovely. It's they fit solidly into my comfort read zone, and the characters are gorgeous. I know they made a movie out of it. I haven't watched it, just out of pure commitment to the original characters that are in the books and the way I see them. I can't personally see Pierce Brosnan being one of the people that they're talking about, but it's just this cast of gorgeous characters in an aged care home who not aging out of it. They're out having a bit of fun, but they're solidly tongue-in-cheek with some of the shenanigans they get up to. The others that really, I still think weekly about All Fours by Miranda July. It still just...
That was a book, wasn't it?
Poor. And it still just whacks me in the brain sometimes when I think about it. It will probably not be one that I pick up and read again this summer, just because I'm trying to remember all the details of why I found it so compelling. But it's just that perimenopausal fever dream of of an artist. And
it's a genre.
It really is a thing, and it kicked a whole genre off. And so I found that absolutely gobsmacking. The other one, which I recall just with a genuine astonishment and love, is Orbital by Samantha Harvey. You'll know that myself and Kath waxed lyrical about that earlier this year, and it's that 24 hours on a space station orbiting the Earth, and the multitude of different takes on the mundane reality of functioning in that system, but also the astonishing overwhelm of looking down on everyone you know and love on this ball,
spinning through space. Terrifying thought.
Exactly. Yes. And so the simplicity and complexity of that book just still sits with me really powerfully. And another one which we will bring you an interview on Sundoku probably in the new year, which was a big step outside of my usual reading, is a book called Plain Life, and it was a bit more philosophical. It was sort of analysing the many ways in which we function, a bit more like looking at the psyche and thinking about, how you cope with the reality, which is the world. So you wouldn't call it self-help, but a series of essays sort of just looking at the human condition, which I found really enlightening. It's the type of thing that I would normally just go, not really in my wheelhouse, but I found it to be a really engaging and enlightening series of essays to sort of reflect on myself and my way of being. And so, it was fascinating, and really struck me as a learning experience through reading. So it's a good message to push yourself outside of perhaps your regular sort of comfort zones.
I'm still reading. I'm pushing my way through Sapiens, and I've got further than I normally get with a non-fiction book.
You've been working on that one a while.
I love it though. I just love he's such a clever writer. He has such a way with amusing, perfect metaphors. Understanding where Homo sapiens came from, why our big brains have possibly been our downfall in the long run, but it is so interesting.
Oh, that we'll have to add that to
quite
my
a good Christmas book,
Sundoku,
really.
I think.
Yes. Okay, time for us to go. happy reading over these holidays, and thanks for joining us. I'm Annie Hastwell.
I'm Sarah Martin, and all the best for the festive season.
This podcast is produced by 4 book addicts refusing treatment.
Kath Keneally,
Michaela Andreev,
Sarah Martin.
And me, Annie Hastwell. Our thanks to composer Quincy Grant for the music. If you want to know more about the books and authors featured in this episode, check out the show notes. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at SundokuCast. That's TSUNDOKU Cast.